Carp fishing's great when it's going right, but it's a nightmare when it's going wrong. Right, so we're 3/4 of the way through September. Last time I did a film was about talking about the snake and how well spring had gone. So what am I going to do with this one and say how badly it's going since I've come back from summer. Oh, I had a holiday a couple of weeks away, which was lovely. Done a little bit of time here and there. Tried to get something going in a swim that I started off in spring. Lost another one out of there. Wasn't seeing anything, but just sort of persevered. Some people get a bit territorial down here and they try and get things going. Nothing wrong with that. I suppose I tried to apply that in that swim, but there was a lot of weed in between me and my spots, and I don't think that really helped me. I got it out of one weed bed, it's into another weed bed, and you're trying to avoid having to slacken off, because obviously you're slackening off and then you've got a greater chance of the hook coming out. And so I always try and maintain as much pressure as I can and hoping that they're going to come out of the weed without the use of a boat, because that's not easy either. But no, I lost it and that was my only chance. And then since then, somebody else had jumped in the swim. You can't help that, it's the way it is. And I've had to muck around in other areas. But back to what I was saying, you know, when it's going right and when it's going wrong. When it's going right, your baiting seems to go to plan, your rigs are always working. When it's not going right, you start questioning everything. You start questioning am I on the right bait. At the moment, we've got this utter domination on Dinton with this bait that's been going in for the last 3 years. And, you know, it sort of plays on your mind a little bit. You think, I'm not on it, obviously. But there's, the weekend, there was 6 bites out, all come out on the same bait. It's fair play to the guys that are on it. The more that have joined the team, the more of a domination that this bait is doing on this lake. And you know, it's the fish seem to be preoccupied on it. But you got to keep going. I keep persevering. And like this morning, I had fish over me, and that's when I'm thinking I should be getting a bite. You know, they were there. You know, they were, and I had it last week, and nothing. These rods are not doing anything. But anyway, I keep dwelling about it because you've got to keep going and keep persevering. But the last couple of years I've been fluky enough to have a few out in September, and they are feeding. They do have a good feed up before it gets to that point what I said in a previous film, the middle of October, when it suddenly starts going bleh, and that's it, it's happening. But I thought that what we do today is we just talk about what's my approach to where I'm going to go. You've got sort of like over 90 swims on this lake, so why pick this one in particular that I'm in at the moment? How do you present on a lake that's absolutely stuffed full of weed, which ain't easy? So I thought we'd just go through a little bit of that and what I do. Of course, I know I appreciate to some people it's like sucking eggs, but I'm always interested to know how people approach things differently. I always find it quite educational. This has got a lot of weed in it at the moment. And you've got there's some things that we can do that make that task a lot easier, to finding holes in the weed and areas where you can present easily by access to trees and the sun being right, the clarity of the water. But let's just, you know, do it to say where we are at the moment, which is ripple on the surface. You can't see the weed beds that are there. Light levels are not right for you, so we've got to use it for a traditional marker setup. So let's have a little play around with that, and I'll kind of give the reasoning as to why I've chose where I am and how I'm going to go about finding where I need to present my bait.
Please remain seated.
This lake's, I think it's 26 acres. And it's very long. We've got a bay down there, which a lot of people call the top end. And we've got the car park bay right at the other end up there. So location is obviously very important. Historically in September, they've been around this sort of area where I am. The swim bang opposite over there last season was where I had triple row, and I saw, you know, I saw big fish showing there this time last year. The year before, a little bit further down. So there's a bit of a pattern. They tended to be in this area, but don't get me wrong, there's quite a lot of fish in here, which doesn't make it any easier. There's often a few other big fish that are up the other ends, and you know, so you're trying to go where you feel some of the better stamper fish might be. Couple of big fish have been out of late in this area. Son of triple row come out of the swim over there, and it's also come out of a swim further down. Lake hasn't given up since it reopened from spring. It hasn't given up some of its other big fish, so they're still due to come out. But why have I picked it now? I was in a swim next door, I was working an area, and I kept seeing them show halfway out this area, some good fish as well. But I had a look over the other side, and the light was really good, lending itself, and I could see the weed was an absolute nightmare, and it's literally going in waves. You know, you could just see little gap weed, and it's got to be about 1 to 2 foot below the surface. And if the conditions are like it are now, you're not going to see that. So it's kind of hitting it right in the day, and you're getting that upper hand. There's not that many trees that you can kind of get up, and I don't sort of advocate that we should be doing that, but that does help with you knowing that you haven't got to cast around and try and find clear spots, because that's ultimately what we're after. So at the moment, conditions are absolutely bang on down here. It's a nice sort of steady wind that's coming down here. If I get a fresh wind or something and it switches the other direction, great. You know, you sometimes might want to move in that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So what I was going to do is I have to get in the water here, because you try casting up here, there's trees all over the top of you. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get into the lake, use a setup that I do to try and find what I'm after, which is somewhere to present a bait. I don't want it sitting on the weed. Obviously, there's a time and a place to doing that. Having intel so that you're not over leading it often helps. If the fish are in the area, it's a no-no. You really don't want to be chucking leads on their heads, because they will disappear. As I said, it's a long lake. They will travel. Generally, where they want to be, you can kind of get away with it. You know, I don't really worry too much. I'd rather it presenting 100% right, knowing it's fishing, than you know, just saying that will do, because often the case it won't do. So get in the water, have a little look, and show you what it is that I do, which is probably similar to most people, but it might not be. So let's see. Let's give it a go. Okay, so what am I using to find out what I've got out there? First things first, I've got a very stiff rod. This is a spom rod. You can use a marker rod, of course, but I prefer to use one with a really stiff action. This is about 5.5 pounds, this particular one. The reason for that is because you literally feel every little bump and everything you want to feel on the bottom, because it has got literally no flex in its tip. So I'm always much happier using something like that than I am a softer rod. Good reel to cope with retrieve when you're casting out and then wanting to get the lead back quickly. And on the end, literally attached to gardener's marker braid, I'm using for here. I don't need to go that far. I'm going to be casting probably no more than 50, 60 yards. I've got a 3-ounce lead that would do the job. I tend to like a bit of the dung leads that gardener do, so I get a better feeling through the line. That is just really important to me. Attach it to a big loop, and I grab it by having another little smaller loop. So it's just tied with an overhand. So what that allows me to do is I can interchange, look at this, making hard work of it, interchange the lead and replace it with, say, a spom, or I might want to put a marker float setup on it. It'll cope with either that. You just thread it along and put the necessary items that you need to convert it. So really good setup, that, really nice and quick and easy. I use this same rod, you see, as I would for spomming as I do for markering up. And I find that the clips that are on the spool are invaluable, because they allow me to find my distance, and by using the trees as a marker in the background, I find where I'm going to go, and the line gets stuck, or gets stopped Once it hits the stop, what you've wrapped around, when you found an area you want to find, and I'll detail that in a minute, and then you can literally just go up to your sticks and measure it out, how far it is that you were, and you can obviously match that up to your baited rod. So that's how we go about doing that. Right, you might have seen other people doing this. This is a pole in the lake. So there's a couple of purposes. You can put a bucket on here for spomming, but it's also important to know exactly where you stood. So I tend to like to use a pole right here, stand next to it, and I know exactly that wherever I've measured out or what I found, I'm positioned in the right place. Like, oh, I haven't, you know, I'm gone back here, or, you know, I think, oh, where was I? I've gone over here. So no, I know exactly where I've got to be. Now, as I said earlier, I know over that way, and I'm cheating a bit because I already did this yesterday. I'm already got my stops on here. I'm marked up to this particular bit, but I try and show what we don't want to feel and what we do want to feel. Now, out there's a lot of weed. You need to always have and maintain a tight line when you're casting it out. If you cast and you let that rod tip go down and you create slack, there was a fish that just went out over there, right on us, so I don't want to chuck that out at the moment. That's the last thing I want to do. If you allow it to go slack, you're not going to feel what's happening with the leg going down. Now, with columns of weed that are going through the water, if you feel that and you get accustomed to what that feels like, and it's kind of like you can just feel something going down. When you've got a tight line, it will demonstrate that. You will find that it's going through the columns of weed, or if it's clear and it's going all the way down, you'll get this nice sweeping, nothing stopping it. That lead is just going all the way down until you hit the bottom. Now, that's the bit where you want to know what it is that's on the bottom. If it's gone soft, you might be lying on some weed. So at that point is where you'll pull back the line, you'll pull back, you know, have a look. I tend to try and keep the lead high. Keep the tip high, rather than going where you see some people that they try and pull the tip to the side. That's fine if you've not got loads of weed out there. But if you have, all you're doing is you're pulling the line into the weed beds. To give you an idea, so I'm going to just show it on this one, not out there, because that's where my spot is, and that's typical that we brought our rods in and a fish is shown. That's my luck. So out here, it's going to be difficult to show you this, so I'm just going to have to try and talk it through. So I'm going to hold the line there with my finger. Okay, now that, I kept and maintained a tight line all the way through. Now, I didn't feel any resistance of it going down, to show that the columns of the weed are not that high in that area, but I didn't get a good drop. I got a really spongy sort of drop. So I know that if I pull this, looking at the tip of my rod, I'm just going to get resistance straight away, and that's exactly what I'm feeling. So I'm already in quite a bit of weed. As I pull gently, that's how thick it is. Really, really thick. So that's no good. Now, if I'm trying to plumb an area, if I be all gentle like that, the likelihood is I'm just going to get that weed is going to be stuck. So here we go. So look, that weed has now cemented itself around the lead. So I've got very little chance of being able to utilise that cast in finding anywhere between where it landed and to me. So a method that you can try to save you consistently casting out is, yet again, we'll go to a similar sort of area. So I'm going to cast it back again, keep the lead up, and as soon as it lands, keep a tight line, and then yet again I felt it spongy, so I know full well that it's not on hard bottom, or I don't mind it being on soft bottom, by the way, but it's got to be clear. So if the tip's doing that, as you can see, which is bending a lot, then I know it's not clear and I'm fishing in weed. So it's not really ideal unless you want a really high travelling chod. So what I tend to do is, if it's plugged like it has been, try and just pluck it out. And if it's too thick, you know not to cast there again. So you know you've got to come a little bit shorter, or go slightly to the left or slightly to the right. But what we're trying to do, so we'll go a little bit shorter now, but you don't want to be landing in that bit because we know full well it's very heavy weed there. Get that weed off. Let's clean that up a bit. So I'm just going to go slightly shorter. Hold it up again. I can feel the weed there. So I get a feeling that it's too dense. So I'm just bringing it up. And if you pull the rod back with the lead and keeping the line tight, try and feel that tip down. Try and use the weight of the lead to allow the lead to follow itself down into the bottom till you can, so you are maintaining contact with that lead and you can feel if it's going down. Now, see, I'm moving it a lot easier, so there's potentially something around that area. So I'd rather investigate around that zone and see if I can get a decent drop rather than the area that's slightly past it, because that way, that is far too deep a weed and I'm not going to find anything in there and the presentation is not going to be right. That's the starting sort of area, and then you can sort of go a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. Sometimes there just isn't a clear spot, and that's, you know, it makes it very hard to find, but with practice, and as I said, maintaining a tight line, you're getting to a point where you're understanding whether you're fishing in 3 foot of weed or whether you're fishing on clean bottom. So take a little bit more line off and use the stops that I just mentioned. I've put the line back into then. So when I hit my stopper, or my line stop, it's going to land in the bit where it should do. And that's clear, see? If it cracks down really hard and it bumps along the floor, you know you've got some gravel. If it cracks down and you pull it back with no resistance, it can be clay, it can be hard silt. Usually clay would give itself away with, if you've got a rough lead like this, you'll get a bit of clay on there, which is a lot of anglers' choice where they like to present a bait. It certainly is the case on here. So practice makes perfect. The infamous wrapping sticks. Lead just goes around one. Make sure your braid is always wet when you're doing this, because if you don't, and you just take the rod out of the bag, you can get all sorts of wind knots. So the braid's got to be wet and keep it tight. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 5, that's what I kind of call it. So that is just shy of 8 wraps that's there. And that's exactly where that spot was. So when I'm coming to doing my other rod, that's the distance I would be measuring out. And lining it up with the trees that were opposite, and I should be exactly on the money.